Welcome to your quiet corner of cosmic discovery. I'm here to share something genuinely fascinating about our universe at just the right volume for drifting off. You know, I've been thinking about hypnosis lately, how it's often seen as this mysterious trick or maybe even just a kind of self-delusion. But what's fascinating is that there's real science behind how our minds enter those unusual, focused states. Tonight, I'd love to share some surprising insights about what's really happening when someone's hypnotized and why it's more than just smoke and mirrors. A soft tap of the like button or a whispered subscription tells me these calming discoveries resonate with you. What aspect of science brings you the most wonder? Now, take a moment. Adjust your blanket. Find the perfect hollow in your pillow. Let your shoulders melt. Breathe in and out. On a rain-polished street in the deepening dusk of 19th century Vienna, gaslights flickered behind panes of glass. Their glow seeped through the fog, painting the cobblestones with trembling halos. In the muted hush of the city, a certain parlour on the Ringstrasse drew a different kind of light, softer, stranger. A current not of flame, but of rumour and anticipation. There, behind heavy velvet curtains, people gathered not to dance or debate, but to witness phenomena that blurred the border between mind and mystery. The air bore the scent of beeswax and anticipation. In that parlour, Franz Anton Mesmer received his patients. He was a man of striking presence, with dark, searching eyes, and a voice that, to some, seemed to thrum with hidden power. He would lean close, his hands hovering above the afflicted, sometimes tracing the air, sometimes gliding along the body without quite touching. The room would hush, breaths held, as Mesmer claimed to direct a subtle fluid, an invisible force, through the nerves and vessels of the suffering. This was not medicine as most knew it. This was mesmerism, a word that would ripple outward into science, pseudoscience, and story alike. Mesmer's theory shimmered with the poetic logic of a world only half explored. He believed in what he called animal magnetism, an unseen natural energy enveloping every living being, flowing through them like water through hidden channels. Disease, he said, was a blockage, an eddy in this current. His hands, he insisted, could restore the flow, drawing out illness, restoring harmony. His patients convulsed, swooned, sometimes rose from their seats in fits of laughter or tears. To many it seemed miraculous, to others it was a performance, perhaps even a fraud. Yet the city whispered of cures and transformations, and Mesmer's name spread, gathering both disciples and skeptics. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the hum of those bygone salons, the low thrum of anticipation as Mesmer's fingers traced invisible paths through the air. The flicker of candlelight on glass vessels, the gentle clink as he arranged his baquet, a wooden tub filled with magnetized water and iron rods, around which his patients would sit in a circle, hands joined, awaiting the mysterious current. Sometimes, as the session began, the only sound was the ticking of a clock and the soft, rhythmic sound of Mesmer's voice, drawing his patients into a state that hovered between waking and dream. It was in these rooms, half laboratory, half theatre, that the modern idea of hypnosis began to gestate, not as a single, sudden discovery, but as a slow accretion of myth, observation, and imagination. Mesmer himself never used the word hypnosis. That would come later, as his disciples and doubters tried to understand what precisely was happening in those dim-lit parlours. But the seeds of fascination were sown. The notion that the mind might be touched, altered, opened by suggestion, that consciousness was not a fixed fortress, but an ever-shifting landscape, susceptible to hidden tides. As Mesmer's fame grew, so did skepticism. In 1784, a royal commission led by Benjamin Franklin, yes, the American statesman, was appointed to investigate Mesmer's claims. The Commission's experiments, conducted in stately Parisian salons, found no evidence for the existence of animal magnetism as a physical force. They concluded that the effects were due to imagination, to the power of expectation and belief. Yet even as they dismissed Mesmer's theory, they could not dismiss the phenomena themselves, the trance-like states, the strange obedience to suggestion, the curious transformations of mind and body. The Commission's report, intended as a censure, became instead a seedbed for new questions. In the decades that followed, mesmerism spread across Europe and America, morphing and adapting to each new cultural moment. It became a parlor amusement for the wealthy, a hope for the ailing, a curiosity for the scientific. Travelling magnetizers performed public demonstrations, their subjects collapsing into limp submission at the mere wave of a hand. Mesmerism appeared in medical treatises, in penny dreadfuls, in the whispered conversations of drawing rooms. It was both a science and a spectacle, a shimmering borderland between reason and wonder. As the 19th century waned, the vocabulary shifted. The Scottish physician James Braid, observing the phenomena of mesmerism, sought to strip it of its mystical trappings. He coined the term hypnosis, from the Greek hypnos, for sleep, after noticing the sleep-like trance that seemed to descend upon his subjects. Braid, methodical and skeptical, believed he had found a psychological process, a state of focused attention and heightened suggestibility rather than a channeling of invisible fluids. Yet even as he wrote of neurohypnotism, the language of mystery clung to the practice. It was too strange, too alluring, to be fully domesticated by science. And so hypnosis drifted further into the currents of culture. It became a motif, a plot device, a source of fascination and fear. In the flickering lamplight of Victorian England, hypnotists toured the music halls, their performances hovering between marvel and menace. Subjects would be summoned on stage, made to forget their names, to cluck like hens, to fall into rigid trances at the snap of a finger. The audience gasped, laughed, sometimes shivered. For some, the hypnotist was a magician, for others, a puppet master. Writers, too, fell under the spell of hypnosis. In the pages of Gothic novels and penny dreadfuls, the mesmerist became a stock character, part scientist, part sorcerer, wielding the uncanny power to bend the wills of others. In The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Robert Louis Stevenson's split protagonist toys with the boundaries of mind and self, his transformation echoing the hypnotic dissolution of personality. In Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Count's gaze is described in terms that recall the mesmerist's stare, a force that penetrates consciousness, eroding resistance. The theme was irresistible, that under the right circumstances the mind could be breached, its autonomy dissolved, its secrets laid bare. In the gilded parlours of the fin de siècle, where séances and spirit photography flourished, hypnosis became enmeshed with the supernatural. Mediums claimed to enter trance states, channeling the voices of the dead. The boundary between hypnotist and medium grew porous. Both trafficked in altered states, in the tantalizing possibility that consciousness could be unmoored from its everyday moorings. The parlour became a laboratory of the uncanny, a space where the ordinary laws of mind seemed suspended. The language of science and the language of magic mingled, inseparable. As the 20th century dawned, the shadow of hypnosis lengthened across the new landscapes of popular culture. The silver screen flickered to life, and with it, hypnotism acquired an entirely new visual grammar. The spiral eyes, the swinging pocket watch, the authoritative voice intoning, "You are getting sleepy, very sleepy." These tropes, both comic and sinister, became shorthand for the mysterious power of suggestion. In early cinema, the hypnotist was often a villain or an exotic other. Svengali, with his mesmeric stare, controlling the beautiful Trilby. Caligari, the mad doctor, sending his somnambulist Cesare, to do his bidding. The image of the hypnotized subject, glassy-eyed and helpless, became a symbol of vulnerability, a metaphor for the fear that we are not masters of our own minds. In the jittery years between the wars, with Freud's theories of the unconscious swirling through intellectual circles, hypnosis seemed to offer proof that the self was porous, unstable, susceptible to hidden influences. In the shadowy chiaroscuro of film noir, the hypnotist became both a figure of dread and desire, an emblem of the dangerous allure of surrender. Science fiction, always hungry for metaphors of control and transformation, seized upon hypnosis with relish. In H.G. Wells's The Island of Dr. Moreau, the eponymous doctor uses hypnotic suggestion to enforce his will on his monstrous creations. The motif recurs, evolving with the anxieties of each era. As the Cold War dawned, the fear of mind control became entwined with fears of political subversion. In Richard Condon's The Manchurian Candidate, hypnosis is weaponized, used to transform an ordinary soldier into an unwitting assassin, his will subsumed to programming. The story resonated with anxieties about brainwashing, propaganda, and the fragility of free will. Comics and cartoons, too, played with the imagery of hypnosis. The swirling spiral, the dangling watch, the phrase, "You are under my power," all became icons, instantly recognizable, half joking, half serious. The hypnotist's power was both a joke and a threat, a source of slapstick and suspense. Children's shows employed it as a convenient plot device. A character falls under a spell, does something wildly out of character, then snaps out of it with a shake of the head and a cartoon twinkle. Yet beneath the laughter, the image persisted, that somewhere, out there, was a force that could reach inside you, reshape your thoughts, your memories, your very sense of self. The parlor had become the stage, the screen, the page, but the fascination endured. Even as science advanced, seeking to demystify hypnosis, its cultural associations proved remarkably resilient. In the laboratories of the 20th century, psychologists mapped the contours of the trance state, measuring brain waves, cataloguing suggestibility. They demonstrated that hypnosis could be induced without swinging watches or mystical hand gestures, that it was a natural state of focused attention, a narrowing of awareness, a deepening of absorption. Yet the old images lingered. The hypnotist with his velvet voice and piercing stare, the subject lost in a dream, the whispered words that open hidden doors in the mind. These are not merely scientific phenomena, they are archetypes woven into the fabric of our shared imagination. The tension between science and spectacle, between explanation and enigma, persists to this day. Hypnosis is at once a clinical tool, a stage act, a plot device, a symbol. It appears in crime fiction, in medical dramas, in stories of espionage and romance. It is invoked to explain lost memories, sudden transformations, uncanny recoveries. It is both a promise and a threat, a doorway to hidden potential or a vector of unseen influence. In the age of the Internet, new forms of hypnotic suggestion proliferate. Videos and audio tracks promise to induce trance, to unlock creativity, to banish anxiety. Self-hypnosis manuals clamor for attention alongside conspiracy theories about mind control, government experiments, and subliminal messages. The vocabulary of hypnosis, trance, induction, suggestion, seeps into the language of advertising, of politics, of everyday persuasion. The line between the hypnotic and the ordinary, the extraordinary and the mundane, grows ever more blurred. Yet if you close your eyes and listen, you can still hear the faint echo of those early parlours, the soft cadence of Mesmer's voice, the hush of anticipation, the sense that something deeply strange and beautiful might be about to unfold. The story of hypnosis is not a straight line, but a spiral, ever circling back on itself, drawing us inward, deeper, toward the mysteries of mind and will. The old questions linger, unresolved. What is the true nature of this phenomenon? How much of our consciousness is open to suggestion, to change, to transformation? Are we ever fully awake, or always hovering on the cusp of sleep, our boundaries porous, ourselves in flux? The answers shimmer just out of reach, like the play of candlelight on glass. As the world outside grows quieter, the stage is set for a deeper exploration, not only of hypnosis as a cultural artifact, but as a scientific phenomenon, a door into the workings of the mind itself. The journey inward is just beginning. If you've ever stood beneath the towering columns of an ancient cathedral or wandered the echoing halls of a museum late in the day, you may have felt the hush that settles over the mind, an awareness that your thoughts are both your own and somehow part of a vaster silence. There is a similar hush, a poised stillness at the threshold of the conscious mind, a place where the familiar self dissolves and something stranger, more elusive, begins to take shape. It is here, in the labyrinth of the conscious, that the science of hypnosis unfolds, a discipline as much about what we do not know as what we do. To speak of hypnosis is to conjure images, some dramatic, some subtle, a stage lit by soft lamps, a hypnotist's mellifluous voice, an audience member with eyelids fluttering as if on the brink of sleep, or perhaps a quiet consulting room, the steady tick of a clock, a therapist guiding a patient to recall a memory long buried in the folds of time. These are the surface ripples of a phenomenon that has haunted the edges of science for centuries, the capacity of the mind to slip its usual moorings, to become suggestible, pliant, as if the boundaries between waking, dreaming, and believing have become fluid. The journey through hypnosis winds first through the terminology, for language itself is a compass in the fading light. The word hypnosis finds its root in the Greek hypnos, for sleep, yet hypnosis is not sleep, nor is it waking. It is an altered state, a divergence from the usual patterns of consciousness, distinguished by focused attention, reduced peripheral awareness, and a heightened capacity to respond to suggestion. But this is a map drawn in charcoal, smudged at the edges, for even among researchers the precise borders of hypnosis remain under debate. Let us pause and peer through a scientific lens to ask, what happens truly when a person is hypnotized? The journey begins with induction, a series of instructions or cues, often verbal, designed to relax the body and quiet the internal monologue of thought. The subject's attention narrows, like a beam of light in a darkened room, until the world shrinks to the hypnotist's words, the cadence of their voice, the rhythm of breath. Sensory input from the outside world dims, the mind becomes more receptive to internal imagery, memory, and suggestion. Neuroscientific studies, with their arrays of electrodes and humming MRI machines, have begun to trace the outlines of this altered state. When a person enters hypnosis, changes ripple through the brain. Regions that govern attention, such as the anterior cingulate cortex, light up with increased activity, as if the mind's spotlight is burning brighter. The default mode network, a constellation of brain areas involved in self-referential thought and mind-wandering, shows altered connectivity. The boundary between inner experience and outer reality blurs. Suggestions offered by the hypnotist can become so vivid that they are experienced as reality. Consider for a moment a classic experiment. A subject is told, under hypnosis, that their arm is becoming lighter, lighter still, floating upward as if buoyed by invisible helium balloons. And to the observer's amazement, the arm does indeed rise, slowly, gently, as if moved by unseen hands. Is it mere play acting, a performance for the benefit of the hypnotist? Or is something deeper at work, a reconfiguration of the body's sense of agency, so that voluntary and involuntary actions become indistinguishable? This is the first riddle in the labyrinth, the nature of suggestion. In ordinary waking life, we are bombarded by suggestions, advertisements, social cues, the voices of friends and family. Yet only under hypnosis does suggestion seem to acquire a peculiar power, a potency that can reshape perception, memory, and even physiology. Pain can be numbed, colors perceived where there are none, years-old memories summoned with crystalline clarity. The skin may flush, the pulse race, or the eyes water in response to nothing more than softly spoken words. Some have likened this to the phenomenon of focused absorption, as when one reads a novel so engrossing that the rest of the world falls away, or becomes so lost in a film that the emotions on the screen become one's own. Yet hypnosis is not identical to these states. It is more directed, more susceptible to external guidance. The hypnotized subject is not passive, but rather intensely engaged, collaborating on some level with the hypnotist to construct a new reality. The question then is what distinguishes the hypnotized state from ordinary attention or imaginative absorption. This is where science falters, its instruments finding only partial answers. Some suggest that highly hypnotizable individuals possess a unique ability to dissociate, to divide consciousness, so that one part of the mind can accept suggestions while another stands aside, observing, uncritical. Others propose that hypnosis is a form of role enactment. The subject, knowingly or not, plays the part expected of them, guided by social cues and the implicit contract of the hypnotic ritual. Yet evidence accumulates that something more is at work. In clinical settings, hypnosis has been used to ease pain during surgery, to treat phobias and anxieties, to alter habits and perceptions. Subjects under hypnosis can display physiological changes, reduced heart rate, altered skin conductance, even shifts in immune response that are difficult to attribute to mere pretense. In brain imaging studies, the neural patterns evoked by hypnotic suggestion differ from those produced by mere imagination or voluntary effort. And so we wander deeper into the corridors of the conscious, where the walls are hung with paradox. On one side, the subject is awake, aware, able to respond to questions and recall events. On the other, their perceptions and behaviors can be transformed by suggestion, as if reality itself is being rewritten. The will is not abolished, but modulated. The sense of agency, of self-authorship, becomes ambiguous. A person may find themselves unable to move a limb, compelled to forget a word, or convinced of a harmless hallucination, all while knowing, on some level, that these experiences are the result of suggestion. This duality has led some theorists to describe hypnosis as a state of divided consciousness. One part of the mind, the executive self, remains aware of the ongoing experiment, while another part, sometimes called the hidden observer, experiences the suggestions as real. In a famous set of experiments, subjects under hypnotic anesthesia, unable to feel pain in their hand, could nonetheless signal through indirect means that some awareness of pain persisted. The mind, it seems, is capable of splitting itself, of compartmentalizing experience in ways that defy easy explanation. Yet even as science probes these mysteries, the limits of our understanding become evident. Hypnosis is not a uniform phenomenon. It varies dramatically from person to person. Some are highly susceptible, able to enter deep trance states and respond powerfully to suggestion. Others remain largely unaffected, their consciousness anchored in the familiar patterns of waking thought. The reasons for this variability are still only dimly understood, perhaps a blend of personality traits, cognitive styles, genetic predispositions, and life experiences. Moreover, the boundaries of hypnosis are porous. There is no clear line separating the hypnotized mind from the daydreamer, the meditative monk, the child lost in imaginative play. The mechanisms that underlie hypnosis, focused attention, absorption, dissociation, suggestibility, are present to varying degrees in many ordinary experiences. Hypnosis, then, is not an alien territory, but a landscape contiguous with the rest of mental life, distinguished only by the intensity of its features. Let us pause and consider the physiological signature of hypnosis. Electroencephalography, EEG, reveals a shift in brainwave patterns with increased alpha and theta activity, frequencies associated with relaxed wakefulness and the threshold of sleep. The body relaxes, heart rate and respiration slow, and muscular tension ebbs away. Yet this relaxation is coupled with heightened mental activity. The mind is simultaneously tranquil and alert, open to suggestion, yet capable of intricate mental imagery. In the fMRI scanner, the brain of a hypnotized subject reveals altered connectivity between regions involved in attention, sensory processing, and executive control. The anterior cingulate cortex, which mediates conflict and focus, shows increased activation. The thalamus, a relay station for sensory information, may modulate the flow of signals to the cortex, dampening the impact of external stimuli. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, responsible for self-monitoring and volition, may loosen its grip, allowing suggestions to bypass critical scrutiny. These findings suggest that hypnosis is not a single, monolithic state, but a fluid interplay between different neural systems. It is as if the usual gatekeepers of consciousness have stepped aside, and the mind is free to wander unfamiliar paths. Yet the precise choreography of these changes remains elusive. Each subject's brain is a unique labyrinth, shaped by genetics, experience, and the mysterious workings of self. As researchers probe deeper, the question arises, is hypnosis best understood as an altered state, a distinct mode of consciousness, or as a set of behaviors and expectations shaped by social context? The answer may be both, or neither. Hypnosis blurs the boundary between state and role, physiology and psychology, inner and outer reality. It is at once a product of the brain's architecture and the rituals that guide human interaction. It is worth noting, too, the limits of hypnosis. Despite dramatic claims, hypnosis cannot compel a person to act against their will or moral code. The hypnotized subject retains a core sense of self, a capacity to resist or reject suggestions that violate their values. Nor is hypnosis a panacea. It is not a cure-all for every ailment, nor a gateway to hidden truths. Memories recovered under hypnosis may be vivid, but they are not always accurate. The mind is as prone to invention as to recall. Still, the power of suggestion under hypnosis is undeniable. The mind can be led to experience sensations, emotions, and beliefs that defy logic or expectation. Pain can be transformed, phobias unlearned, habits reshaped. The brain, so often thought of as a passive receiver of reality, reveals itself as an active constructor, capable of generating worlds from words alone. And so the labyrinth winds onward, its corridors branching and looping, its chambers echoing with unanswered questions. Each step reveals new vistas and new mysteries. Hypnosis is not a relic of the past, a curiosity of Victorian parlours and stage shows, but a living field of inquiry, rich with paradox and potential. The conscious mind, it seems, is more plastic, more mutable than we ever imagined. Yet, as with all great mysteries, the deeper we venture, the more enigmatic hypnosis becomes. The brain, illuminated by the flickering light of scientific insight, remains a place of shadows and thresholds. The territory between waking and dreaming, between self and suggestion, is vast and largely uncharted. In the quiet that follows, one might sense the presence of yet deeper layers, regions where the unconscious mind stirs, where memories and emotions, habits and fears, flow beneath the surface of awareness. Hypnosis, for all its strangeness, is but a doorway to these inner realms, a key that unlocks hidden chambers. What lies beyond, what strange mechanisms, what ancient patterns, remains to be explored. The labyrinth of the conscious, with its shifting walls and secret passages, beckons us onward. The science of hypnosis, for all its rigor, is still young. The limits of our understanding are but lanterns flickering at the edge of a vast unknown. As we press forward, the boundaries between science and story, between knowledge and wonder, blur and dissolve, inviting us to venture deeper into the mysteries of mind. And somewhere in that darkness, beneath the surface of attention and suggestion, other forces are at work, processes that shape our thoughts, our actions, and our sense of self. It is toward these hidden mechanisms, these silent architects of experience, that our journey will next unfold. The room is dim, the hush punctuated only by the faintest hum of distant traffic, as if the world beyond these walls has faded into a hazy, half-remembered dream. Here, in this softly lit chamber, the boundary between the ordinary and the extraordinary shimmers with possibility. It is the very sort of place where the earliest students of hypnosis and those who would seek to unravel its mysteries might have gathered, scholars and skeptics, healers and illusionists, each clutching their own tools, their own hopes, their own doubts. To trace the tools of the hypnotist's trade is to walk a winding path through centuries of fascination and skepticism, through shifting paradigms of science and spectacle. The instruments themselves range from the tangible, a glinting pendulum, a ticking metronome, to the intangible, words, expectation, the steady cadence of a trained voice. Each device, each technique, is a thread in the great weave of hypnosis research, everyone shaped by the era's beliefs about the mind and what, if anything, might lie hidden within its depths. The earliest hypnotists did not call themselves by that name. Before the word hypnosis entered the lexicon, there was mesmerism, named for Franz Anton Mesmer, an 18th-century Viennese physician whose own tool of choice was not words but magnets. Mesmer believed in a universal fluid, an invisible force he called animal magnetism that could be manipulated to heal. His séances were elaborate affairs. Patients would gather around a becket, a tub filled with iron filings and water from which rods protruded. They would grasp these rods as Mesmer swept his hands in mysterious passes, eyes fixed on his charges, urging them toward crisis, convulsions, sobbing, trembling, catharsis. In the candlelight, as the air grew thick with anticipation, many would swoon or fall into trance. The tools here were tactile and theatrical, designed as much to invoke awe as to effect healing. But as the Enlightenment dawned and the scientific method took firmer hold, Mesmer's magnetic fluid was scrutinized by commissions of the learned. In 1784, a panel led by Benjamin Franklin and Antoine Lavoisier was convened by King Louis XVI to investigate Mesmer's claims. Their approach was methodical, almost modern, blindfolded subjects, controlled conditions, and careful observation. They concluded that the effects of mesmerism were not due to any physical force, but to imagination and suggestion. The becket and the magnets, they declared, were props. Yet unwittingly, they had identified something profound, the power of suggestion itself, and the need for rigorous methods to probe it. As the 19th century unfurled, mesmerism shed its magnetic trappings and took on new forms. In England, a Scottish surgeon, James Braid, watched a demonstration of animal magnetism and was struck not by the supposed force, but by the gaze, the fixed, unwavering stare of the subject at a glinting object. Braid coined the term hypnotism from the Greek word for sleep, though he would later regret the choice, realizing that hypnosis was not true sleep. His tools were simpler, subtler, a bright object, often a pocket watch or a crystal, suspended so the subject could fixate upon it. The slow, rhythmic swinging would tire the eyes, and as Braid intoned soothing words, the subject would slip into a pliant, trance-like state. Braid's innovation was to strip away the theatricality and to begin, tentatively, to map the psychological landscape. His tools were now at once physical, the watch, the lamp, and verbal. He developed a script of gentle encouragements, suggestions to relax, to focus inward. He noticed that not everyone responded the same way, and so he began to classify subjects according to their nervous disposition. The first glimmers of experimental hypnosis had arrived. In the decades that followed, the laboratory replaced the séance as the site of inquiry. The tools of the hypnotist multiplied and evolved, guided by the changing currents of psychology and neuroscience. In Paris, Jean-Martin Charcot, a towering figure at the Salpêtrière Hospital, regarded hypnosis as a window into hysteria and the workings of the nervous system. His approach was clinical and dramatic. He would induce catalepsy or hallucinations in his patients, then parade them before audiences of doctors, demonstrating the suggestibility of the afflicted mind. For Charcot, the tools were not just the methods of induction, but the careful, almost theatrical staging of the subject as a living case study. In contrast, in the quiet consulting rooms of Nancy, Hippolyte Bernheim and Ambroise Libaud took a gentler, more democratic approach. They believed suggestion itself was the key, and that anyone, not just the hysterical, could be hypnotized. Their tool was the spoken word, the artful modulation of tone, rhythm, and expectation. They began to experiment systematically, recording how different phrases, different images could shape the experience of trance. Their legacy is still felt in the scripts and patter of modern hypnotherapists. As the 20th century dawned, the methods of hypnosis research became more refined, more standardized. The pendulum and the watch remained, but now they were joined by new tools, psychological scales, questionnaires, and experimental protocols designed to tease apart suggestion, expectation, and susceptibility. In 1939, Clark Hull, an American psychologist, published Hypnosis and Suggestibility, a landmark work that sought to bring order and rigor to the field. Hull's toolbox included the notebook and stopwatch, the rating scale, and the statistical analysis. He developed the first standardized tests of hypnotic susceptibility, such as the Stanford Hypnotic Susceptibility Scales, which are still used today. In these tests, subjects are led through a series of standard suggestions. Your arm is light as a feather, your eyelids are growing heavy, and their responses are scored according to precise criteria. These scales, though simple in appearance, are powerful tools, allowing researchers to map the contours of hypnotizability across populations. Some people, it seems, are naturally more responsive to suggestion, more able to immerse themselves in the vivid world of trance. Others remain resolutely anchored in the here and now, unmoved by the hypnotist's words. The reasons for these differences are still the subject of ongoing research, but the tools to measure them are now well honed. Beyond scales and scripts, the laboratory itself became a tool in the hands of the hypnotist researcher. The controlled environment, a quiet room, free from distractions, the gentle glow of a shaded lamp, serves to cocoon the subject, to create a space apart from the ordinary world. The arrangement of furniture, the softness of the chair, the cadence of the clock, all these are calibrated to foster absorption, to smooth the passage into trance. The language of the hypnotist, too, is a tool wielded with care. There is an art to suggestion, a craft honed over centuries. The voice must be steady, confident, inviting. The words chosen must be evocative yet open-ended, allowing the subject's mind to fill in the details. You may notice a sensation of warmth in your hands, or perhaps a gentle heaviness in your eyelids. The hypnotist plants seeds, and the subject's imagination does the rest. It is a duet of minds, the boundaries between speaker and listener dissolving in the shared space of suggestion. With the advent of modern technology, the tools of hypnosis research expanded into new domains. Electroencephalography, EEG, allowed scientists to peer into the electrical rhythms of the brain during trance. Researchers began to ask, does hypnosis produce a unique brain state, distinct from waking or sleep? The answer, as so often in science, is complex. EEG studies revealed changes in certain brainwaves, an increase in alpha and theta rhythms, sometimes associated with relaxation and focused attention. Yet these patterns are not exclusive to hypnosis. They are found in meditation, daydreaming, and other altered states. Functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, ushered in a new era, offering a window into the living brain. Now, researchers could watch as different regions of the brain lit up or fell silent during hypnotic suggestion. In some studies, hypnotized subjects were told their hand was numb, and the pain centers of their brains responded as if the hand truly were anesthetized. When given suggestions to see colors that were not there, their visual cortex responded as though the colors were real. These findings hinted at the astonishing power of suggestion to shape perception at the neural level. Yet the story is nuanced, and the tools themselves are not infallible. fMRI images are indirect, composites of many moments, and the brain's workings are as intricate as a labyrinth. Psychophysiological tools extend beyond the brain. Skin conductance monitors measure the subtle changes in sweat gland activity that accompany anxiety or relaxation. Eye-tracking devices record the slow, drifting gaze of the subject as trance deepens. Heart rate monitors and breath sensors capture the body's responses, mapping the interplay between mind and flesh. In every case, the goal is to make visible what is otherwise hidden, the subtle shifts in consciousness that mark the passage into and out of hypnosis. The science of suggestion, too, has its own arsenal. Researchers design clever experiments to tease apart the effects of hypnotic induction from simple compliance or expectation. In some studies, subjects are told they have been hypnotized when they have not, or vice versa. In others, the wording of suggestions is varied to see how subtle differences shape the outcome. The double-blind, placebo-controlled trial, the gold standard of medical research, is difficult to apply to hypnosis. How can one blind a subject to the knowledge of being hypnotized? But researchers strive for rigor nonetheless. Some of the most fascinating tools are those that probe not just the effects of hypnosis, but the nature of consciousness itself. The ideomotor response, for instance, is a subtle movement, perhaps a finger twitch or a pendulum swing, produced without conscious volition, seemingly by the force of suggestion alone. In the late 19th century, the English scientist William Benjamin Carpenter observed that when subjects were told that a table would move and encouraged to rest their hands lightly upon it, the table sometimes did indeed begin to shift. These movements were not deliberate but arose from unconscious muscular action. Today, experiments with ideomotor responses are conducted with fine sensors and motion trackers, revealing the deep connections between thought, intention, and action. The hypnotist's toolbox is not only scientific, but also artistic. The setting, the mood, the trust between hypnotist and subject, all are essential ingredients. The most advanced brain scanner is of little use if the subject feels uneasy, distracted, or resistant. Rapport, empathy, and suggestion are as critical as any instrument or protocol. Across the world, hypnosis is studied in many guises. In clinical settings, therapists use hypnotic techniques to ease pain, quell phobias, and help people break free from unwanted habits. Here, the tools are scripts tailored to the individual, recordings of gentle guidance, perhaps even virtual reality headsets that immerse the subject in calming landscapes. In research labs, the tools are standardized, calibrated, designed to isolate cause and effect. In the theater, the hypnotist's tools are showmanship, laughter, and the willing suspension of disbelief. Yet, for all the advances, there remains an air of mystery. The tools of the hypnotist, from the gleaming pendulum to the humming MRI, are only as powerful as the mind that wields them, and the mind they seek to explore. The boundary between the real and the imagined blurs under the spell of suggestion, and each new technique reveals just how much we have yet to understand. As the evening deepens, the hypnotist's toolkit sprawled across the centuries, one can sense the restless curiosity that drives this field forward. The gentle tick of the metronome, the soft glow of the lamp, the whisper of suggestion, they are all invitations to journey further inward, to probe the shadowed recesses of the mind. Beyond the laboratory and the consulting room, questions linger. What precisely is happening when a subject follows the hypnotist's voice down into the labyrinth of trance? Are we glimpsing some fundamental property of consciousness, or only the interplay of attention and expectation? The tools sharpen, the experiments grow more refined, but the heart of the mystery remains, beckoning reseer. Sharers and dreamers alike onward into the unknown. And so, in the quiet stillness, the stage is set for the next exploration, the deep riddle of how hypnosis alters the mind and what its shifting shadows might tell us about ourselves. Reflections in the hypnotic mirror are never quite what they seem. They shimmer, shift, and invite us to gaze beyond the visible into those deeper chambers where the mind's shadows and lanterns play across the walls of consciousness. The study of hypnosis, so often framed in terms of neural oscillations, suggestion, or clinical technique, ultimately circles back to a primal question. What does it mean to be aware, to be suggestible, to hold within ourselves the power to alter our own realities? Here, at this hour, when the mind softens and the world grows quiet, we may all allow ourselves to wander at the edge of the known, peering into the silvery pool of hypnosis and its philosophical ripples. What is it to be hypnotized? The word itself, ancient and yet perennially reborn, hovers between science and myth. Hypnos, the Greek god of sleep, lends his name, yet hypnosis is not sleep. It is a paradoxical state, at once focused and diffuse, vulnerable and empowered, a suspension of ordinary judgment and yet a new mode of agency. There are those who describe hypnosis as the artful turning of attention and narrowing of the spotlight so that certain sensations glow with uncanny vividness while others recede into shadow. Others liken it to a waking dream, a state where the boundaries between self and story, between will and world, become permeable. At its heart, hypnosis is a mirror, not a flat pane of glass, not a cold reflector of surfaces, but a living, rippling mirror, one that shows us not only our faces, but the weather of our inner lives. When a person slips into hypnotic trance, whether guided by a therapist's voice or their own practiced rituals, the distinction between what is real and what is imagined becomes less rigid, more negotiable. The hand that feels light as a feather and rises without conscious effort. The pain that dissolves because the mind has been invited to rewrite its script. The memories that glow with new color or soften at the edges. All these are acts of meaning-making, not mere illusions. To philosophers, this is a territory of great fascination and some unease. Hypnosis unsettles our cherished notions of autonomy, of a single, continuous self steering its course through life. The philosopher William James, who watched hypnotic experiments with both skepticism and wonder, wrote of consciousness as a stream, not a thing but a process, a flow whose eddies and currents can be shaped by suggestion, expectation, or the gentle pressure of another's words. In hypnosis, the stream bends. It circles back on itself, forming whirlpools where the usual flow is suspended, and in these eddies, new forms of experience arise. One might ask, if a suggestion in trance can make a person forget their own name or feel no pain from the prick of a needle, what does this say about the sturdiness of identity? Are we, as some traditions have claimed, little more than the stories we tell ourselves, ever ready to be rewritten if the teller's voice is persuasive enough? Or is there a deeper core, a silent witness that observes even as the stories shift around it? The hypnotic mirror does not answer these questions outright. It only reflects them back, more luminous and more perplexing. Consider the paradox of control. Outsiders sometimes view hypnosis as a surrender of will, an abdication of autonomy to another's commands. But those who have studied and practiced it, scientists, clinicians, even stage hypnotists, often report the opposite. The hypnotized subject, far from being a puppet, is acutely attuned to their own responses, sometimes even more so than in ordinary waking life. They can reject suggestions that violate their values, shape the imagery and sensations that arise, and return to ordinary consciousness at will. The trance is not an invasion, but a negotiation, a dance between trust and participation, where the boundaries of self are gently stretched but not broken. This raises deeper questions about free will. If our perceptions, memories, and even bodily sensations can be so profoundly altered by expectation and suggestion, how much of our daily experience is already hypnotic, shaped by habits of mind and the subtle scripts of culture? The philosopher's mirror grows cloudy here, for hypnosis reveals that much of what we take for granted, our sense of time, the solidity of our bow, dies, the fixity of our beliefs, is malleable under the right conditions. The routines and certainties of waking life are themselves a kind of trance, a consensual hypnosis maintained by repetition and social agreement. The human capacity for trance is ancient, woven into rituals, prayers, and performances across cultures. The shaman's chant, the monk's mantra, the dancer's spiral, all are technologies of the mind, designed to loosen the boundaries of self and invite new patterns of meaning. Hypnosis, in its modern form, is only the latest expression of this lineage, a scientific codification of practices that have always dwelled at the crossroads of healing and mystery. In every era, humans have sought ways to enter these altered states, to touch something larger than themselves, to heal wounds that reason alone cannot reach. But why should the mind be so susceptible to suggestion? Why should a word, a gesture, a focus of attention hold such power? Here we enter the territory of neuroscience, where the brain is seen as a prediction machine, ceaselessly constructing models of the world and of the self. In hypnosis, the usual constraints are relaxed. The mind becomes more willing to entertain new models, to update its predictions in the presence of compelling suggestion. The reality testing functions of the prefrontal cortex are softened, allowing images and ideas to feel as real as sensations. It is as if the gates between imagination and perception are thrown open, and for a time the imagined becomes embodied. Yet, even here, the mystery deepens. No scan or algorithm can fully explain why one person is profoundly hypnotizable and another resists every suggestion. The trait of hypnotizability, stable across a lifetime, seems to reside at the intersection of creativity, absorption, and trust. It is not a weakness, but a gift, the ability to become so absorbed in an idea or experience that it becomes one's temporary reality. This capacity is not limited to the hypnotic induction. It is present whenever we are swept away by a story, lost in reverie, or moved by music. The same neural pathways that allow us to be hypnotized are those that make us dreamers and creators. Some philosophers have argued that hypnosis reveals the constructedness of the self. If we can be made to experience a limb as paralyzed, or to see colors that aren't there, then the sense of I must be, at least in part, an ongoing act of imagination. The self is not a fixed point, but a tapestry woven from memories, sensations, and expectations, a tapestry that can be unraveled and rewoven under the right conditions. Hypnosis, then, is not a foreign invasion of the self, but a reminder of its malleability, its openness to change. This view has profound ethical implications. If our minds are so susceptible to influence, then the quality of that influence becomes paramount. The hypnotist's art is one of care and responsibility, for the suggestions given in trance can shape beliefs, behaviors, even the sense of what is possible. In the wrong hands, this power can be abused. In the right hands, it can heal wounds that medicine alone cannot touch. The mirror of hypnosis reflects both the vulnerability and the resilience of the human mind. There is, too, the question of meaning. Hypnosis is not only a tool for symptom relief or entertainment. It is a way of exploring the boundaries of what it means to be human. It invites us to ask, where do my thoughts end and the world begin? How much of my suffering is woven from habits of attention, and how might those habits be gently altered? What is the nature of agency, if my actions can be shaped by suggestions I do not fully recognize? These are not questions with simple answers, but they are questions worth living. Some have found in hypnosis a metaphor for life itself, the sense that we are all to some extent entranced by our own stories, our own expectations. The philosopher Alan Watts once suggested that enlightenment might be nothing more than the realization that we are dreaming and the freedom to choose a different dream. Hypnosis, in this sense, is a rehearsal for freedom, an invitation to see how malleable the world can be when the mind is supple and willing. And what of the mystery? For all its scientific trappings, hypnosis retains an aura of the inexplicable. It is at its core an encounter with the unknown, with the liminal spaces where words become sensations and belief shapes reality. The experience of being hypnotized, of feeling one's arm rise as if moved by an invisible hand, of hearing a suggestion echo in the mind like a bell, is not easily captured by language. It is an experience that resists reduction, that humbles the intellect even as it quickens curiosity. To watch a person in trance is to witness the mind's capacity for transformation. In the gentle hush of the consulting room, or the luminous hush of the stage, the subject becomes both actor and audience, both storyteller and listener. They enter a world where the usual rules are suspended, where pain can become comfort and memory can be rewritten. It is a realm of possibility, bounded only by the imagination and the ethics of those who guide the journey. The hypnotic mirror, then, is not merely a curiosity of psychology. It is a portal into the fundamental questions of existence, the nature of self, the power of belief, the mystery of consciousness. It reminds us that the mind is not a static entity, but a living field, open to suggestion, capable of change. It reveals, too, the profound interconnectedness of human beings, the way that trust, empathy, and shared intention can open doors to new realms of experience. As you drift further into this reflective hour, the boundaries between waking and dreaming soften. The hypnotic mirror, with its shifting images, invites you to look not for answers, but for deeper questions. What stories do you carry, unexamined, in the quiet corners of your mind? What suggestions, planted long ago, have shaped your sense of possibility? And if you could, for a moment, step outside the habitual trance of daily life, what new worlds might you explore? Gently, the image in the mirror begins to ripple, its surface stirred by the breath of your own curiosity. The room around you fades, and all that remains is the sense of possibility, the awareness that you are both the hypnotist and the subject, both the maker and the made. In this space, the mind is free to wander, to dream, to reflect on the mysteries that lie just beyond the edge of language, and in the hypnotic hush, with the world outside growing ever quieter, the mirror waits. Its surface shimmers with unanswered questions, with the promise of discovery, with the quiet certainty that the journey of mind and meaning is never truly complete. Each glance reveals a new angle, a new reflection, a new invitation to ponder the depths and the delights of the human spirit, and to wonder gently what lies just beyond the next ripple in the glass. As our gentle voyage through the shimmering veils of hypnosis drifts to a close, like a comet tail fading into the hush of space, we find ourselves wrapped in quiet wonder at the mysteries of the mind. May this calm reflection invite you to wander peacefully through the starlit realms within, until we meet again for more Dreamtime tales beneath the endless sky.